Hey y'all, it's Christy Cook with Teadoddles here. Today for tutorial, well, maybe I should call it tips and tutorials Tuesday. I'm going to share with you some tips about storing fabric scraps and whips or works in progress when it comes to sewing. I tend to save every little bit of fabric that I get. I throw very little away because there are uses for even the tiniest scraps. So this is where the tiniest scraps go, even though I see some in there that don't look so tiny. But yeah, all those little snippets and stuff that most people probably throw away, I put in here. This is an old cheese puff container that was my son's. I don't eat cheese puffs, but not that it matters. But and what would I do with something like this? Let's see. I have made, and I'll put a link down at the bottom, I made a fabric scrap wrap. I used like a gauze see-through fabric, and I put fabric scraps in between the layers and sewed across it and made a fabric scrap wrap. Let me see if it's right over here. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is my fabric scrap wrap, which I intend on stitching the sides together and making it more like a wrap. But you can see all the scraps down in there, and this is like a eyelash yarn, and some of them hang down in there, which I really like. But that's something you can do with them. But you can also use it as stuffing, right? Any of the really small stuff, you can use to stuff a pillow with, or a stuffed animal or something like that. I do suggest you mix it with some polyfill or something. Or if you're doing a pillow, I would put batting on the outer layers and then stuff it. It just makes a smoother pillow. So, because it can be lumpy if they're too big. But that's what you can do with those kind of scraps versus throwing them in the trash. I also have a separate container. This is an old Christmas ball container. These are all fabric strips that are smaller than, well, usually they're the ends, the selvages of fabric, or like the ribbons I get off of fabric bundles and things like that. They're just really narrow, long strips is what's in here. And they're good to make strip quilts with, but they're also good to make lampshades with. See? And I do have a blog post about how I made this. I'll put a link to it. I had a lampshade frame, and I just wove selvage edges in and out and kind of glued it on there. And when I found this pickle jar full of wooden spools, I knew it was a perfect match. So I put them together and made a lamp. That was a joint effort between my husband and I. But there's also a post about that, so I'll put both of those links below. So that's something you can do with your selvage edges. You can do things like this. You can sew little pouches with it. You can make a strip quilt. There's all kinds of things you can do with those. So don't throw them away. So those are the small scraps. Now I'm going to talk about other kinds of scraps, right? Let's see. Back here on my shelf, I have all these nice little containers. I'm going to go ahead and pull this little stack out right here. Okay. Now, this is an open container, and it is filled with, like the front says, triangles. Because if I find triangles of any shape and size when I'm cutting out fabric, I'll put them in here, because eventually I'm going to make a triangle blanket, a triangle quilt. So that's why I like to save them separately. And then I have these types of containers, which I used to have baskets, and I'll link to the post where I made these little tags. Okay, had to pause for a second because my husband was going. But I was talking about these boxes, and some people would like to divide these kind of scraps by color, but I found that when I did that, I had a hard time. I'd have to measure the piece to see what size it was. So I prefer to divide my scraps by size. So the 1+ on here means that anything in here is 1 inch up to 2 inches, right? So once I hit 2 inches, it goes into another container, which would be this one. My tag came off. So this is something new that I just did. So it would go into this one, which is 2+. So I know that anything in this container is between 2 and 3 inches, or just under 3 inches. And anything in this container is between 1 and just under 2 inches. So when you look inside, this one in particular also have an extra tray in here with just squares versus strips. So, and the way that these are just plastic shoe containers from Walmart that are like 88 cents, but I found a, I don't know, 6 or 7 pack, which was $7.48, I think. That doesn't sound right. Whatever, maybe it was a 10 pack for $7.48. It was cheaper than buying them a single box. So this is just a cheap solution, and I have some with darker lids, and then some of my older ones have lighter lids. I usually have a couple colors to choose from, but this is the cheapest, easiest way I could find to store these. And I've moved them out of baskets into containers because I have dogs and their hair gets on everything, plus dust. So I felt like it was better to get them into a container. And the way I hung that on there, this is just like a scrapbook brad. Yeah, I poked a hole through the front of the container with a pair of scissors, just a sharp point scissors, not my fabric scissors. And then it has to be a larger brad like this. I don't remember where I got these from. I've had them for a long time. And then these little wooden things I had already made for my other baskets. And I don't know if I said this before, but I'll put a link to how to make those below as well. And then I just hung them on the front of it. So you could also use just a sticker or a sticky label like I have on some of my other containers. But that is how I divide, and I've got everything. Let's see. So over here I have 4 inch plus, 3 inch plus. This says iron-ons, but this is like leftovers from where I put iron-on adhesive on the back of something, and I have pieces because you can use those for other projects, applique projects. And then this is just stuff that I need to cut up and put somewhere else. This says leftovers, and leftovers are like, if I made some, like I did a tutorial on the blog about buttonholes, and I used a little fabric scrap to do that. Sometimes when I'm testing stitches, I'll test it out here and mark it down. I really need to do a book for that. Or just anything that was part of a project that didn't get used for whatever reason. These little tiny quilt squares, stuff like that. Straps that I cut off of something, anything like that that I think I could use at some point for something else that doesn't really fit into any other basket that I have over here. Because this mostly involves my quilting fabrics. I have a whole nother container on the other side that is full of apparel fabric scraps, but I'm just talking mostly about quilting scraps today and quilting works in progress. So let's see, and then this one has doesn't have a label yet, but this is where I put all my mini charm squares that I've collected, and then some that I've cut out myself, and a couple that are I don't know what this is called. These are 3.5-inch squares, which you can find sometimes. So that is how I organize my scraps. I keep them all up in here, and then this box here is anything that I think, these are scraps, but they're also other bindings. Anything I think would make a good binding or strap for something, I stick in here. So this is actually a picture container, and I just stuck the wire up in there and put that brad on there to hold my tag on it, because I already had that tag made. So, and then I have this big bin for my 5-inch squares because they wouldn't fit in one of these. So that's how I take care of most of my smaller scraps. Anything bigger goes over on my fabrics shelf, which I'll put a picture of at the end. So then all these containers are quilts in progress. They usually come from a quilt along or something like that I do over the year. Some of these are very old because I need to finish them up. But what I'll do is, for these I just make a little sticky back label. And this is just an index card, one of my favorite things to use for labels. And I just put some of that double-sided adhesive on the back and stuck it on the front, because I can pull it off whenever I finish this quilt top and use it for a different project. So I didn't want anything quite as permanent as these tags. So that's why I used it like that. This keeps everything all in one place. The blocks as I make them. Okay? And so you can see I'm trying to empty these out and finish all of these up that are in here. So I have 369, and I did take 2 off of the shelf that I recently finished the top for. So I am getting a little better at that. But in this basket down here, I have quilt tops that need to be quilted, like my postcards from Sweden, or my crosswords quilt, but that's mostly what's in this basket. And these big baskets I found at, I'm gonna take it off so you can see it better. Found these at a thrift yard sale thrifting thing, and they were just old wired baskets, and I cleaned them up and I painted them. I put some little handles on the end, and I do have a blog post about that. But these are quilt tops that need to be quilted. This one is the only one that's not this corduroy business going on, because it's a quilt as you go squares that I'm doing. So that's what's in that basket. And there's a basket on the very bottom that has some fleece backings. You can see this is another one of those baskets I got. It has a burlap in it that I also got from a thrifting adventure. And there's a basket down here that has orphaned blocks in it that I did for whatever reason. I was testing something. Sometimes I test blocks for people, or that I did for the blog or something. That's where they go. So that is basically how I keep up with all of my scraps. I do, as I said, I have a separate bin for apparel scraps, because I wouldn't use those in the same manner as I use quilting scraps. Because quilting scraps can, of course, be used for other quilts, or, like I said, my lampshade. So, I think that's going to be it for this little video, because I just wanted to share how I store all of my works in progress. Of course, this is not all my works in progress. These are quilts in progress. I have, okay. Something else that's good for storing works in progress is a shoe rack. Like this one. See? So this is, this does have some quilt blocks in it, but they're usually ones that I'm just experimenting with or testing out, things like that. It's not just quilt blocks in here. Sometimes it's got, these are little bags where I've divided up some scraps in some colors that I want to make a block out of. So I could make, see, these are what I mean by the strip piecing quilt blocks. So sometimes I'll put them in baggies and divide them up into a colorway that I want to do a block in. So there are some works in progress here, but they're not something I'm working on intently right now. Okay, I had to stop for a little bit because my phone was dying. I am recording with my phone. So I'm just gonna wrap this up. Those were things I used to store works in progress and scraps for quilting. I'll do a video another time about how I store my apparel scraps, and then possibly one about the yarn scraps. Yes, I keep all kinds of scraps. I keep scrap everything. I may have a little problem. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to end this. So if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. I will be doing a video podcast this Saturday, and it will be about, I'm calling this one Fabric Obsessed, because it'll be all about sewing and fabric. So I'll see y'all then.